Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the surprising story of a technology that is so fundamental to our lives, we barely even notice it's there. It's a story about a revolution that changed what we eat, where we live, and even how long we live. It's the story of how we as a species learned to manufacture cold. So let's just start with a simple thought experiment. Go ahead, picture that big box humming away in your kitchen. Think about all the fresh milk, the veggies, the leftovers. Now imagine it's all gone. Not just from your house, but from every single store and restaurant. What would you even eat?
Because, for almost all of human history, that empty fridge, that was just reality. Life was a constant, nonstop race against decay. Humanity was locked in this endless battle against warmth, and, well, warmth always won. The whole idea of freshness was a luxury you measured in hours, not days or weeks.
So let's really try and imagine that world for a second. A world without any cold. Life was ruled by what historians call the tyranny of the seasons. Your entire diet was basically a map of where you lived and a calendar of the current month. What you ate was decided completely by whatever was growing nearby, right at that very moment, right? See, the only way to save food for later was to completely transform it. You didn't just preserve pork, you turned it into ham. Cucumbers became pickles, grapes became raisins. And all these techniques, they were born out of pure necessity, and they defined the world's cuisines. They created this global palette based on the chemistry of survival, not the actual taste of freshness. Now, it's not like ice itself was some new discovery. The ancient Persians built these incredible structures called yakchals just to store it, and Roman emperors had snow hauled down from the mountains. Even George Washington had his own private ice house. But for literally everyone else, ice was an impossible dream. It was a symbol of incredible power and wealth, not something you just had.
And that brings us to our first cold rush. It all kicks off in the early 1800s. All thanks to the obsessive and, let's be honest, kinda crazy vision of one guy from Boston. His name was Frederic Tudor, and he was about to launch the world's very first global cold chain.
His idea was simple, but to pretty much everyone around him, it sounded completely insane. He wanted to harvest frozen ponds in New England during the winter and then ship all that ice to the sweltering heat of the tropics. So in 1806, he sent his first shipment to Martinique, and the local newspaper just mocked him, calling it a slippery speculation. And they were right, at first. It was a total disaster. The people there had no idea what to do with a boatload of frozen water, and it all just melted on the docks.
But here's the thing. Tudor's real genius wasn't just in shipping ice. It was in building an entire economic system from scratch. First, he had to literally create demand. So he came up with this brilliant marketing trick. He'd go to a popular bar and give the owner free ice for a year. Pretty soon, that bar was famous for its amazing chilled drinks, and every other bar in town had to start buying Tudor's ice or risk going out of business. Second, he built the infrastructure, these big insulated ice houses in port cities to store his product. And third, he totally perfected the logistics. He figured out that sawdust, which was just a cheap waste product from lumber mills, was the perfect insulator. This one simple trick slashed his losses from melting from a crazy 66% all the way down to under 8%. And innovation was absolutely the key to making this thing scale. Now, Tudor was the visionary, for sure, but his foreman, a guy named Nathaniel Wyeth, was the real engineering genius. In 1826, Wyeth invented a horse-drawn ice plow that could score the ice in a perfect grid. This let workers harvest these perfect, uniform blocks with industrial speed. This single invention tripled their capacity, it cut costs by 2/3, and it turned a back-breaking chore into a full-blown industry. At its peak, it employed 90,000 people in the US alone. Okay, so that brings us to the next great leap forward, inventing the cold machine itself. For all its success, the natural ice trade had a huge flaw. It was completely at the mercy of the weather. Plus, as the world industrialized, the ponds and rivers they used were getting pretty polluted. The world now had a taste for cold, and it needed a much more reliable source. It needed a machine that could make cold whenever you wanted it. This solution came from a fundamental principle of physics. When a liquid evaporates and turns into a gas, it sucks up a ton of heat from its surroundings. It's why sweating cools you down. Engineers figured out how to harness this into a closed loop called the vapor compression cycle, which, by the way, is still the basis for pretty much every refrigerator and air conditioner today. It just continuously forces a special fluid, a refrigerant, to evaporate and absorb heat from inside the box, and then condense and dump that heat outside the box. And this tech wasn't the work of just one person. It was more like a relay race of crucial breakthroughs. In 1834, Jacob Perkins patented the basic idea. Then, in 1851, a doctor in Florida named John Gorey, who was desperately trying to cool down his yellow fever patients, built the first ice-making machine in the U.S. But it was a German engineer, Carl von Linde, who finally perfected it in 1876. He created the first really reliable industrial refrigerator, for breweries, of all things, forever changing the world of beer.
But this powerful new technology came with a deadly serious problem. The best early refrigerant by far was ammonia. It worked great, but it was also toxic, flammable, and corrosive. A leak in a big industrial plant could be, and sometimes was, catastrophic. This danger was the single biggest thing that kept refrigeration from moving out of the factory and into your home. I mean, nobody wanted a box in their kitchen that could leak a lethal gas.
So that brings us to the moment where cold really remakes society. The invention of a safe refrigerant in the 1930s finally solved that danger problem. And that just unlocked the technology's true potential, kicking off a revolution driven by something called the cold chain.
This cold chain, and you gotta get this idea, it's an unbroken network of refrigeration from the farm to the factory to the truck to the store and finally to your home. It completely re-engineered daily life. Before, your diet was local and seasonal. After, it became global and year-round. Refrigerated train cars meant cattle could be processed in Chicago and shipped east, turning meat from a rare luxury into an affordable staple. And air conditioning, refrigeration's close cousin, allowed cities to just explode out into the hot climates of the Sun Belt. The impact was absolutely staggering. This network literally changed the map of America, kicking off a massive refrigerant migration that shifted the country's political and economic center of gravity. It revolutionized medicine, making things like blood banks and the global distribution of vaccines possible. And right inside the home, it drastically cut down on the daily chore of food shopping and preservation, which freed up countless hours of labor, mostly for women. But all this progress came at a cost, a big one. There's a dark side to this story, a whole legacy of unintended consequences. Our mastery over temperature came with a planetary-sized bill, and, well, that bill has come due.
This timeline tells a really interesting story. It's a repeating pattern of us solving one problem only to create another, even bigger one. That safe refrigerant from the 30s, Freon, a type of chemical called a CFC, well, in the 70s, scientists figured out it was tearing a hole in the Earth's ozone layer. So in a pretty rare moment of global unity, the world banned it. But its replacement, HFCs, well, they solved the ozone problem only to create a massive climate problem. They turned out to be incredibly potent greenhouse gases, which led to another global agreement to phase them down in 2016.
So just how potent are we talking about? Well, this chart shows the global warming potential of different gases. If we set carbon dioxide, CO2, as our baseline, just 1x, you can see methane is about 28 times more powerful. But then look at HFCs. They are in a completely different league. We're talking thousands of times more effective at trapping heat in our atmosphere. They very quickly became one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gas emissions on the entire planet. And this has trapped us in a really dangerous, vicious feedback loop. As the planet gets hotter, our demand for air conditioning and refrigeration skyrockets. But the energy we use to power those systems and the refrigerants that leak from them, well, they just make the planet even warmer. The solution to the heat is now a major cause of the heat. So that leaves us with a final, really crucial question. Our quest to control our environment led us to conquer the tyranny of the seasons, which was an incredible human achievement. But in doing so, we accidentally created a much bigger, much more dangerous problem. So, what's next? What's the next solution? Because the cold revolution isn't over. It's not even close. It's just entering its most critical phase yet. The next chapter isn't just about comfort or convenience anymore. It's about developing sustainable cooling for a hotter world. The quest for cold has now become a quest for survival.